once again going slowly through Mossflower as we pick up the next two chapters before we get to one of my favorite parts in the book series. So we have another desperate attempt by the Woodlanders, and we have another desperate attempt by Serena, and it doesn't result and very good results, unfortunately, really for either side, and doesn't really accomplish much. But I think it's important to talk about because it just shows that the nature of the situation is getting dire for both sides. We have the small band of Woodlanders trying to get to Ferdy and Cox and Gingerbeer by providing them with food and supplies. With the aid of the Loamhedge mice and the other Woodlanders, but still fearful. There is a guard of otters and squirrels behind them, and for good reason, as Clud and Scratch happen to see the departure between Columbine and Gomph as they go their separate ways. And decide to report back to Sarmina. Thankfully, Sarmina is already on their well, unfortunately, Sarmina is already on their tail, and so we have another skirmish, another battle that basically results in just more casualties, but again, nothing gained, nothing really lost. Woodlanders struggle to withhold them as the moles, mice, and the hedgehogs manage to escape with thanks to Formal and his other fellow moles. Meanwhile, they still manage to get through to Gingerbeer and the hedgehogs thanks to Chib and the two squirrels, Birch and Brush. But it's pretty much just to hold off but it's no better for Sarmina, as Sarmina wants to rush up and attack the Woodlanders head on, but there's really no plan or strategy in place when this happens, so it doesn't really result in anything except few losses. Thankfully, Sarmina manages to at least keep her groups together this time, and they aren't driven off like last time, but last couple times, but it doesn't result in anyone being captured or really very few killed, and so Sarmina's not happy with that, and we see just how in the end there's kind of really at times very little motivation for the vermin except to basically survive. There's a comment by two of the vermin about how basically let everyone else go first, and attempting to do so, he completely ignores the arrow headed in his direction, and so that doesn't end well for him at all, but it kind of shows that there's basically no real motivation on the part of the vermin to really fight except for survive, and just holding him off, they're like, yay, we held him off, we forced the retreat first, but that's only because they had not anticipated the attack and were left with little ammunition from either Skipper of Otter's stones or Lady Amber and her squirrel's arrows, and so it forces them to create a retreat and even a diversion where Skipper and the Otters managed to build up a hidden pile of spears and arrows and stuff in order to make it look like they're a bunch of otters, but thankfully the diversion works. But again, nothing really of value or worth comes of it. And so Sarmina is in a terrible temper, mainly once again, and even Clud kind of almost proves useless until he suggests turning the screws even more fully on our dear old Ferdy and Cogs, and decides we need to not just because we had a moment earlier also in this chapter of Sarmina once again trying to trick Ferdy and Cogs into revealing stuff with food. But once again, Ferdy and Cogs, except for a tiny little slip, managed to hold out once again. But again, not much gained, not much lost. So now the desperate move must be made, which is to really put Ferdy and Cogs under real pressure and fire. So it's the only move she has. So she's going to attempt even more wicked means upon our poor little hedgehogs. Thankfully, as we see, Gingerbeer is quite clever in himself, and has managed to dig through on both sides of the cell, as we kind of mentioned from last time. And so he suggests plugging the holes basically back up and hiding Ferdy and Cogs in his own cell. A clever move, especially considering Sarmina has rarely thought of Gingerbeer since and really has no interest in him. And so, considering she probably thinks him either dead or very nearly dead, doesn't think him capable of such a crafty, probably little plan. And who would team up with a wildcat, right? So, but we see that Gingerbeer is really taking on responsibility to care for these hedgehogs, and that he's really growing in his desire to really just have joy in his life again, to have friends in his life again. And so he's willing to now to do anything to see that happens. And so he comes up with even a clever plan himself. Meanwhile, the Windlanders, thankfully, because of Chib, managed to hear Sarmina's plans and have decided to make the clever plan of not only having Gingerbeer hide the two little hedgehogs, but also to take two other little hedgehogs and pretend they have Ferdy and Cogs back by dressing them up kind of like they did dress them up like when Ferdy and Cogs left, right? And Ferdy and Cogs are very much little tiny warriors, and they like doing that. So that it not only provides an excellent disguise, but it kind of we see that fits, of course, Ferdy and Cogs characters. So to do that with the other two hedgehogs is actually pretty clever. Um, and so that's the only distraction pull they have left. And so Skipper decides now is the desperate move to really get Ferdy and Cogs out of there and provide a decoy. He must go and seek the mask. And we will find out who the mask is next time, which is one of my favorite characters in the entire book. So we will talk about him next time. In the meantime, we have Martin, Dinny, and Gomf on their quest, and the real delight of this chapter is just seeing how much Martin, Dinny, and Gomf really just outpace the poor hapless vermin that have been asked to pursue him. Clud sent Scratch, Splitnose, and Blacktooth on their way, and this just proves completely useless, as the three vermin can do nothing but think of complaining and bickering. And so proving a pretty useless bunch overall. The only thing that they really have is Scratch's threats and thoughts of food. to keep them going, and that's not very much. Meanwhile, Dinny, Gump, and Martin, with the knowledge that they are being pursued, decide to just continue on their way just at a more jaunty pace, and with uh, just the knowledge that Scratch and his band are behind them, but also not caring too much as they have proven themselves totally inept. And so there's all that. And I like though the kind of interaction between all three, mainly because it really shows what it highlights is really kind of the point in the works, I think, because what it points out is just how little these three have in the ways of experience to really handle any sort of tracking, any sort of ability to really pursue their quarry. I mean, Scratch at least shows some initiative, and he can at least read a trail to some degree. But again, they're pretty much out of their place, especially since they've just had so much food and plenty up until about a year ago, or even a couple months ago, that they've really not had to pursue anyone in the same way they are doing now. And so it just really shows the circumstances are not rife for very much thought. And we see that with one of them referencing Verdaga's parties, right, when they were at their height. And here they are stuck out in the middle of the plains and woods trying to pursue three who are much smarter and stronger and better than they are. So proving pretty useless. They still manage. So Martin, Dinny, and Gomp managed to make their way across the flatlands and managed to get to the point where they can see the spires with woolen sheep upon them, so tall mountains with clouds. And this is where, of course, their journey is really going to start maybe taking a turn, because we will see that they managed to make it out scot-free so far, but will it prove more difficult? I believe so. The only manner of difficulty so far was briefly crossing of a ditch in the road, only because poor Dinny doesn't like leaving the ground. I always like that thing about moles. The moles are it's sort of like that kind of dwarf thing from Lord of the Rings, but even more so, where it's basically like, why leave the ground? I have the ability to basically fly through dirt. Why fly through the air? And Dinny is not too happy about it. And he's also not very apt at trying to carry himself. So he almost loses it. And so that's the only real point where there seems to be any difficulty so far. So we're seeing that despite the pursuit, that all three are doing pretty okay. And it only leads to even more confusion for the three vermin, as one of them believes to have seen a mouse fly through the air, and that's a lovely image. I always remember that when from the Mossflower. I always love that image. I remember that from the books. So there we are. So one get through there, and so we're kind of at a stalemate with Sarmina and the Woodlanders trying to each compete to see if they can save the lives of the poor hedgehogs. Meanwhile, so the real battle of wits begins for those, and also Martin Dingoff are just on the verge of the real trials of as they move beyond the flatlands towards the mountains, and who knows what danger lurks that will prove to actually be a real kerfuffle for our three main heroes. So next time, bye.